My name is Eva Larry. I'm the director here. And it's a pleasure to welcome you to a public art project and exhibition by Kevin Schmidt and Holly Ward, entitled Lost and Found, curated by Markham Public Art curator Yan Wu. And before we begin, I would just like to start with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we walk upon the traditional territories of Indigenous peoples, specifically the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee. We recognize these people's history, spirituality, culture, and stewardship of the land. We are grateful to all Indigenous groups for their commitment to protect the land and its resources, and we are committed to reconciliation, partnership, and enhanced understanding. We are all treaty people. Many of us have come here as settlers, immigrants, and newcomers in this generation or generations past. We would also like to acknowledge and honor those who came here involuntarily, especially those descended from people brought here through enslavement. And now I'd like to invite Markham Public Art curator Yan Wu to
Well, thanks for coming, and it's really great to see all the faces here, and thank you. And it has been a great pleasure working with Holly and Kevin. I really, really love this project and appreciate it. But today I'm really looking forward to hear what we're going to talk about it. And before we start, I just want to read their impressive bio. Holly Ward is an interdisciplinary artist working with sculpture, multimedia installation, architecture, video, and drawing as a means to examine the role of aesthetics in the formation of new social realities. More recently, Ward's practice seeks to develop artistic engagement with non-human entities and ecological systems in a future-oriented practice focused on sustainability and holistic adaptation to rapidly changing natural and cultural contexts. Kevin Schmidt's practice spans sculpture, performance, photography, video, sound, and watercolor painting, and functions as a critical and a subjective examination of spectacle, looking at intersections between DIY culture and contemporary art production. His works often complete and displays to provide new ways of looking at various genres, such as landscape, how-to instruction, or museum display. Kevin's recent solo exhibitions include Public Art Address System as Musée d'Art de Juliette. In 2022, and in 2018, We Are the Robots at Vancouver Art Gallery and Reckless at Polygon Gallery. A monograph on his practice was published by Black Dog Press in 2019 in conjunction with Kamloops Art Gallery and Vancouver's Contemporary Art Gallery. Kevin's work was included in Le Biennial de Montreal in 2014 and Santa Fe Biennial in 2014, and has been collected by the National Art Gallery of Canada, the Vancouver Art Gallery, and Fogo Island Arts. He is represented by Katriana Jeffries in Vancouver. Holly has produced the solo exhibitions at Art Speaks, the Morris and Helen Balkan Gallery, the Or Gallery, YYZ Artists Outlet, Volta 6, and others. She has participated in group exhibitions in Canada, Chile, England, Mexico, the US, Norway, and South Korea. Publications include Plan Hazelwood, published by Kamloops Art Gallery in 2021, Volumes by Blackwood Gallery in 2015, Every Force Evolves, a forum published by Art Speaks in 2012, and For Now on Hollywood's Persistence on Vision, a critical essay in Jeff Dirkson's book After Euphoria, published by JRP Rainier Press in 2013. Her work has been collected by the Vancouver Art Gallery, Fogo Island Arts, and Scotiabank. Public commissions include Cosmic Chandelier by University at SFU, Burnaby in 2016, and The Wall by CPC, and the Vancouver Heritage Foundation in 2011. And Holly is assistant professor in York University's Visual Arts program.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. And we just wanted to say hi, and it's so nice to see all of you here today, so many friendly faces. Thank you so much for coming and giving your time on a Saturday afternoon to kind of hear more about this project, and we love you too. Thank you also so very much to everyone here, the whole team at the Varley. Much appreciated. It's been wonderful working with you. Working with Jan, the curator, and all of the people who have participated in the project. Alessandra, who has facilitated so many things, so many musicians and performers and just community folks who have contributed to this project. So it's not a kind of a singular endeavor by us as the kind of sole authors. So thank you so much to everyone who has contributed and for coming here today. So today we are going to share with you details around the process of creating this project and all of its different iterations. There have been many kind of aspects of this project, and we'll talk to you about all of that. And we're going to talk to you about our previous collaborative projects also. So as many of you know, we do have solo individual artistic practices that we've each been supporting for over 2 decades apiece. But what we're going to talk to you about now is the work that we've done as a kind of collaborative entity. And we wanted to share with you sort of how that process of collaboration came about, what it means to us to be doing that, and share some previous projects that fall within that scope of collaborative practice. So these collaborative projects have sort of stemmed from our own kind of practices and things that we're interested in as individual artists, but they come about very organically through long-running conversations that we have. We are also in a partnership, so we spend a lot of time together, and so we have these kind of long conversations where we go deep into ideas. And those conversations can take place over years. And then we get really interested in actually bringing some of those things to the table into a material form. So did you want to say a few things about that?
Yeah, I think it's like as artists and as people, citizens, members of society, partners, we share a lot of the same interests. And so we have these long conversations, and we each have our own practice where we explore these things on our own, but as a collaboration, it's really, we want to pursue that as a way to pursue these ideas together, because what you're seeing here in this exhibition and what we're going to show you, those things wouldn't exist that way if either of us were to do it individually. And I think together, we bring our own strengths and we make something very different. So like this project was really important for us to do. We wanted to do it together because we wanted to bounce ideas off of each other and bring the things that we each bring to it to make something different than what would have existed if we had just done it as my project or as Holly's project.
Yeah, and just also another note, like any major project that I've done in the time we've been together for over 20 years and that Kevin has done in that period of time, we've both been deeply involved. We've supported and facilitated the production of all of our major projects. So, it makes sense that we would sometimes want to put those energies into doing something under a kind of shared authorship. And again, those projects that come under the umbrella of the shared authorship do draw from deep knowledge of how each other works. We kind of know what each other's strengths are and weaknesses as well. And that it's been interesting to do this project to really kind of explore the things that we already know about how we work individually and collectively, but also explore some new territories with this project as well. So what we're going to do is kind of just walk you through a kind of lineage of how and when we started working together officially, and then we'll lead you up to this project here. So the first project that we started working on in an official capacity together started with a project that was my solo project. Over the year 2009 and 2010, I was artist in residence at Langara College. For that year-long residency, I made this 22-foot in diameter geodesic dome, which I called the Pavilion. And I used it as a kind of catalyst for a series of different projects exploring the utopian imagination. So really thinking about the architectural difference of the geodesic dome by Buckminster Fuller as it existed in this kind of more like brutalist design college campus, really thinking about that kind of form as a container for a series of different speculative projects in which I invited a number of different interdisciplinary artists to come and create works. So this was the first kind of launch project that I did. It was called Ideas and Integrities, a Utopian Library. And I basically made this Buckminster Fuller designed bookshelf. So the idea of the geodesic dome is that it's sort of like a symbol for radical difference. It has no kind of 90-degree angles. There's no like plumb walls, etc. And so everything that goes in it kind of needs to be custom designed and created to work with that form itself. So Buckminster Fuller designed a bookshelf that hangs from airline cables suspended from the structure of the dome itself. And I really liked this idea of like a floating kind of bookshelf to contain a library of different utopian examples of utopian literature. So utopian fiction, philosophy, design, intentional living, magazines, etc. And then I also worked for a long time in the public library system, so I was really interested in this idea of the sharing of books as a kind of utopian idea. So I had these hammocks where you could come and kind of relax and hang out again in a state of suspension and peruse the library. That was the first project that I did. I invited a lot of different people to do different projects within the space of the pavilion. This was a project called Occupying Minds, which was organized by Jeff Dirksen, and it was a poetry reading of different poets and academics, kind of thinking about the state of actually education through a kind of philosophical lens. So readings, also installations, art exhibitions. With this project, I was also really interested in ideas around building self-reliance. So the fact that I learned how to make the geodesic dome for this project was kind of an experiment with like skilling up, this idea of like learning how to actually build and produce kind of the basics of living as an independent artist was really interesting to me. So I was also bringing in people to do workshops around kind of just certain kind of practical skills and ideas. This is the artist Natalie Perschwitz, who had been doing a really interesting project over that year where she was making everything that she wore. She's an interdisciplinary artist and designer from Vancouver, and we did a workshop on like snaps. So this idea of like putting snaps on different kind of garments or accoutrements that you may have to make different things multifunctional. So this idea of like offering people workshops to develop skills was one thing that the pavilion focused on. And musical performance. So this was a closing party that we had. This was a kind of psychedelic, neo-psychedelic rock outfit called Von Bingen and DJ Magnetic Ring. So we had like parties and stuff there too. Towards the end of a period of time where this was on the Langara College campus, towards the end of the residency, I was approached by some local art patrons to move the structure of the pavilion onto a piece of land that they owned up in the interior of British Columbia, up into a remote rural landscape. And so they offered me the opportunity to do that, and I took them up on it. And it was during this period of time that the endeavor was quite large, and I was spending a lot of time up in this location doing this, and I invited Kevin to contribute and be a collaborator on phase 2 of the pavilion project, which was then responding to this kind of remote rural context decentered from the kind of urban center of contemporary artistic production. So did you have a few things you wanted to say about
Yeah, so following from what Holly was doing with the pavilion on Langara as this kind of like displacing or putting Buckminster Fuller's idea of this radical architecture on Langara campus. Now we're moving it up into this rural space. The Buckminster Fuller sort of saw the dome as a machine for living, and so we imagined this space up there as a kind of laboratory for artistic production. And so we built it up there, and following this kind of reskilling or upskilling, we had to learn how to build this thing so that it would provide the infrastructure for us to make art in this space. So we had to learn how to do plumbing, like electricity, how to do roofing, how to do framing, how to do many, many different things.
all of the things which we had no idea how to do before. So it was a real trial by fire.
And it's been a long process. So we started in 2011, and we're still putting it together. Like in addition to like teaching or doing residencies, artist residencies in other countries, or traveling, or gig work, we try to go up there in the summer and work on this project to make it as this infrastructure for artistic production, both for us and for like collaborators that we wanted to bring in.
So something I want to kind of mention about this project is that it is in a remote location. So there's no cell phone signal. There is no fiber optic cable for internet. So the first maybe like 8 years that we were working on it, we had no internet access at all. Now we have like a very slow satellite system. So no cell, not even any radio signal. And this is on in a very high altitude mountain range. So the weather patterns in this area are quite extreme. So it can get like really, really hot in the summer and really, really cold in the winter. And so we felt like in order to be able to spend time up there doing artistic research, it needed to be a kind of facility that was actually functional and worked well. So the location really kind of demanded this amount of investment into it. But what we really found during our time there was that we were spending a lot of time kind of in this territory and learning a lot about the landscape and the history of the culture in this area as well. Trying to kind of learn more about Secwepemc traditions, but also ecology. So we've never really had the opportunity to spend so much time like out of urban centers, and we really started to be shaped and formed by this experience of self-reliance and the merging of art and life and kind of skilling up. So a lot of our projects kind of following our time here were really, our solo independent projects were really affected by the experience of being in this location, but also asking different questions of us as cultural and artistic producers around what does it mean to kind of develop artistic agency, what does it mean to produce art outside of cultural centers, what does it mean to sort of learn and understand more about the ecological systems in which we are kind of embedded and engaged, but also, you know, like different kinds of community as well, right? So this is a kind of ranch land territory. So it really changed a lot of our ideas and thinking like on a quite fundamental level, and I think it's been a huge influence on how we think about making and doing.
Around this time, we were, over that kind of decade, we started spending more and more time up there and less time in Vancouver or other urban centers. And being out on the land and like also, you know, for heat, we had to gather wood. So being closer to this kind of like engagement with the land, it sort of changed a lot how we thought about producing stuff.
Yeah, and livelihood and sustenance, also labor.
Yeah, also labor.
So we wanted to also like not just kind of use that as a place for living and working. We wanted to kind of develop some other projects. You had a story around Lighthouse Park.
Yeah, so over that decade that we had been going, we were still kind of sometimes living in Vancouver or passing through Vancouver, and we went on a walk through Lighthouse Park in Vancouver and came across this kind of abandoned cinema space. I don't know, it was like, it used to be like a cinema, an outdoor cinema that was now in disrepair, like this kind of ruin of a cinema space. And we both loved this, and we were like, we need to make something like this. Then if nothing ever happened, but then a few years later after we'd started the Dome project, we were like, this is the place where we can make this outdoor cinema. So we started working on making an outdoor cinema.
Yeah, and so this is we worked with a local craftsman builder to learn how to do things like fell trees to make a timber frame for an outdoor cinema screen. So this is us felling a couple of trees. We had 2 long posts that we felled and we salvaged 2 other large beams to make a 16-foot by 9-foot, like true 16:9 ratio cinema screen. And this was very much about like learning actual skills of like traditional wood building. So this builder, he grew up making log cabins with his father. And we learned how to peel the logs, form the logs, shape the logs. That's Isabel Powell. She came up and helped us. We had many friends come over the years and help us with different things too, some of whom are here. Many, many thanks, many, many thanks. So learning how to do things like mortise and tenon, kind of traditional building techniques. You can see a broken axe there. There's so much labor. There was a kind of natural amphitheater kind of space adjacent to the property where the dome sits. We were able to, again, the patrons who support this project, they have an excavator, and we did a little bit of terraforming to make a kind of tiered amphitheater outdoor seating area, and this is where we installed the timber frame. This is it kind of all together. We invited a few friends up to kind of have a look.
At the sculpture of it, and then
Yeah.
and then basically, so because now it's like this frame that the cinema is just the space.
So we've had like lots of ideas about like, curating festivals like video art festivals or doing screenings more community oriented. We have found very much with this whole project that like the devil's in the details in terms of like logistics of actually getting stuff done. So sometimes, you have like a grand idea and it takes you like 3 years before you can actually realize something. We were we had a lot of ideas, some of which just didn't get the support they needed.
Yeah, this photo is probably 2016.
2016.
And then we weren't able to actually get up to try to make the actual screen and project anything until 20.
Well, actually, I have a story about this. So this was we like had it in our minds. Okay, this summer is going to be the year. This is the summer of 2020. We're going to like put the screen. We're going to make the screen. We're going to put the screen in. We're going to invite some people to like screen some stuff. And basically, that was the summer of the heat dome. I don't know if you guys remember hearing about the heat dome in BC. So. We were sitting in the dome sewing this screen, 16-foot by 9-foot actual screen during the heat dome. The heat dome it was above 40 degrees Celsius. It was boiling, boiling hot. And then everything caught on fire and was on fire for the rest of the summer. So we were kind of choked out by smoke, but we were really like, we need to put something on the screen this summer. We can't invite people up here. You can't come and go. We were on evacuation alert for 3 weeks. But we did this. which was we just wanted to at least have a way of kind of marking the place of the project. And so we did a short kind of animated text land acknowledgement that we then put on the screen during the first few days of the fire season.
That was like 3 slides. So this is Secwepemcúlecw, the unceded territory of the Secwepemc peoples, stewards and protectors of this land since time immemorial. And that looped on there for, I don't know, over the sunset. And we screened it for whoever happened to go by on the road and all of the flora and fauna that live there. Because it was really smoky and there was no way we could do any kind of event.
Yeah, and the following few summers have been similarly racked by forest fire. So the kind of real, the real life kind of stumbling blocks that you come across, yeah, we experienced that.
So that was 2020?
2021.
2021?
Yeah.
So now we're going to go back in time. In what year was this? 2014.
It says on one of the further slides.
Yeah, 2014. We were invited by Donald Lawrence, who's the chair of the visual art department at Thompson Rivers University in Kamloops, to participate in an artistic research project all about camera obscuras. So it was going to be a festival and take place in Dawson City on the solstice in 2015, 16. We'll get the actual date
The date will come
later.
up when we show you the actual
So
artwork.
Donald had invited each of us as separate artists to come up, and we did a site visit at Dawson City to think about what we're going to make. And we just decided at that point we wanted to work together. We might as well. We're going to spend all this time. We're going to be up there. Well, let's work on something together. So what we did is what we noticed when we did the site visit is that the city of Dawson is surrounded by gravel. Basically all around the city, because of the gold rush, they flooded all along the Yukon River and had these massive machines just going through these flooded areas, digging up gravel and then dumping it out the back, just looking for gold.
So yeah, there's really big areas all around Dawson City, which is in Trondheim territory in the Yukon. They're called dredge piles, and they're like these big snaking kind of forms of gravel, and it's one of the largest terraforming, industrial terraforming projects. It was, you can see it from outer space. It's the largest kind of terraforming, industrial terraforming.
In the photo, you can kind of see all of this is just bare gravel from these machines going, it's all just gravel.
So it's like surface mining, right?
All around the city.
So we were kind of struck by the transformation of the landscape due to this kind of like frenzy of the gold rush. And Dawson City, if anyone has ever been there, the whole city itself kind of stands as a kind of living museum of this kind of heyday of the gold rush. So we were really sort of thinking about this kind of marking of the land as a result of this kind of a desire to kind of unearth the riches of this area. And then we were also, we became aware of, this is a natural landslide. So this is also a kind of area of exposed gravel. And this is actually, the Trondheim peoples refer to this as moose hide slide. And so for them, this was seen as a very kind of auspicious demarcation of this landscape. So the settlement around Dawson, the indigenous settlement, was placed there, located there because of this moose hide slide. It was seen as a very kind of fortuitous symbol of wealth and riches. So for those folks, the idea of like there being a large moose hide kind of stretched out and spread out means you've got sustenance, you've been fed, you've got shelter, all of this stuff. So for them, this is a sacred site. And basically, if you look at like the landscape of Dawson City, the dredge piles are kind of at one end, and the moose hide slide is at the other end. And I had been looking at Lucy Lepard's book, Undermining, at that time, where she talks about her kind of local community, which I can't remember where she is. She's in a rural location in the States somewhere, but one of her neighbors makes a lot of their money through gravel mining. And so she sort of wrote a whole book called Undermining, which was looking at gravel, kind of looking at gravel through a lens of industry and culture, thinking about the significance of the kind of material transformation of landscape. And this was sort of what we were seeing in the place of Dawson, right? That there were different interpretations of this kind of exposed rock, and different ideas around kind of wealth and prosperity that were being kind of, I thought, displayed through these exposed gravel.
So what we did is we made two camera obscuras. One to look at this moosehide slide gravel, the Trondheim kind of culturally significant gravel, and one to look at the dredge pile gravel. And the form of the camera obscura that we used is we were thinking about pyrite, which is when you're looking for gold in areas where there might be geologically occurring gold, there also occurs pyrite, which is fool's gold. It's something that looks like gold but isn't. So we made these two pyrite geodes, or pyrite nuggets. Each one, two of them, they're like identical or almost identical, and one is placed near the moosehide slide. Here you can see, this is looking the other way. You can see the city of Dawson laid out along the Yukon River, and then our
that little
nugget.
spot on the nugget is the lens of the camera obscura looking at and framing the moosehide slide.
So here you can see a closer view of where that hole is, where the lens is. And then each of
Go inside it.
then each of the nuggets you could go inside, and this 2015, this is the year we did it. And we had it set up for the solstice, which is June 21st.
24-hour, like
So it's
24-hour sun. So it's like the
24-hour
Camera
sun.
Obscura Festival was sort of around this idea that like they'd be operational like
The whole 24 hours.
24 hours, yeah.
Inside, this is what you see. The light from the lens would hit this kind of plexiglass screen, and so you would see the moosehide slide projected on the screen inside the pyrite nugget, displayed opposite, like flipped vertically and horizontally. So then the other nugget was in the dredge piles. So this is, you can see kind of the typical dredge pile, just these piles of loose gravel. And in this slide that we showed you before, right in the middle, that's it there. So here's another view of it in this just sort of, just these massive fields of gravel, and they go for kilometers outside of Dawson. Here's the close-up, and you can see again the little hole for the lens, and you could go inside the back of it, and then inside you would get to see this mirage or vision of the gravel inside the pyrite nugget.
Two images of gravel, yeah.
So we were not the only artists that were in this festival. There were many other artists, and then all of the artistic research from this festival then went on a kind of small exhibition tour at the Kamloops Art Gallery and the University of Lethbridge. So here, this is at the Kamloops Art Gallery, and you can see one of our pyrite nuggets displayed between these two prints. We made on silver gelatin paper inside the nuggets, where we exposed the paper to the lens and then developed the paper, so then you'd have like a negative of here.
Got to use our sculptures as a darkroom,
Yeah.
which was like really fun.
Functional darkroom. So here's the moosehide slide, and then here's the dredge pile in negative. And those are the artworks that resulted.
There's a hardcover catalog of this exhibition just on the other side here where the bookshelves. So yeah, take a look if you're curious.
And basically that brings us up to this project, to the Lost and Found project.
Yeah, so
which
this
we
was-
now have half an hour to talk
Okay.
about.
Yeah, I just wanted to say this was another instance where Yan had approached us each individually. We each did kind of individual visits with Yan, and she invited us to come and respond to the trail system here in Unionville. And again, it was another instance where it was like, well, you know, we're walking through the space together. We might as well like go out together, and then we're sharing ideas. We're just like brainstorming. We're riffing off of different things we're seeing and noticing. So we did decide to turn it into a collaborative endeavor at that point as well. So
we started out by doing site visits with Yan. We came here to go walk along the Rouge Valley Trail, just to see like what is this space? What do we want to do here? And as we were walking along the trail, there's a number of things we noticed. One was that there were a certain amount of kind of artistic interventions along the trail where there's these kind of plaques that occur every now and then, and the plaques tell you what to do and what to notice and how to operate in that space so that you can be artistic. And we found that kind of framing
kind of limiting.
Limiting.
And,
it's like there's so many things
Yeah.
that you encounter in our day-to-day existence that tell you exactly how you're supposed to consume something. So you go into the shopping mall and you know how you're supposed to behave because everything is dictated. And we found that this kind of framing on the trail where it's like, think about this space like this, was something that we wanted to actively try to make an artwork to counter. That was our kind of our first impulse. And then another thing that we noticed when we were walking along the trail was, at one point, one of the days that we went out to do a site visit, we noticed that there was some musician practicing somewhere. We never actually saw the musician, but it was someone practicing a flute, and we could hear it, and it sounded really beautiful, even though they were just practicing scales. And just this sound coming through the space, and we thought, this is something that's way different than these didactic panels. This is something that someone is using this for their own use, but their activity bleeds over to us. And so it's for them, and it's for us. It's all of those things, not just one thing or another. And so we thought, this is something that we would really like to try to bring forward.
And it got us really thinking about like how you could be having an experience like, you know, if you're like walking on the trail, it's kind of like a leisure activity, right? You're maybe not like super focused on like, I have to go and accomplish this thing. Maybe you're like off the clock and you're, you know, maybe having a kind of social experience or, you know, experience in nature. And we were really interested in thinking about the ways that in a more relaxed state of mind, your ability to kind of perceive and understand and interpret and engage with things can be quite different than when you're kind of moving about in a kind of goal-oriented sort of way. So we wanted to bring some interventions into this space that didn't have a frame around them in terms of they were being presented to you as an artwork, and then you would have preconceived ideas around like how you should think about that, or what you should feel about that, or what you might like want to do with that. So we really wanted to kind of play with this kind of like space of like liminal perception, where there could be a kind of looseness of kind of perceiving things and experiencing things, and that maybe they don't need to kind of gel into a kind of a specific way for them to be valuable or meaningful. So we just were really kind of thinking about a very loose approach to offering things in that space that could then kind of gel in different ways. So,
as a template for what we were going to do, we kind of remembered a project that I'd done in 2011 for Nuit Blanche here in Toronto, or not here in Toronto, wherever.
Over that way.
Over wherever it is. And for this project, which I called Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow, I was curated into one of the zones for Nuit Blanche in 2011, and I used my entire project budget I put out a call to buskers, and I said, the call was basically, as a busker, you can come and participate in my project and get like an a stipend, an hourly stipend, for playing a set of songs along a 40-block stretch of Yonge Street. So like every 100 feet for the whole night of Nuit Blanche, I had enough buskers along the street all playing this same set of 9 songs. And all of the songs were songs that were about the morning after. So like some kind of night of excess, and then this is the morning of regret. So one of the songs was Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow? I can't remember all of the songs. But basically, the idea was that this set of songs was like kind of addressing the event of Nuit Blanche itself. And it's like, will you still remember us the next day? And also I was thinking about, because Nuit Blanche at that time billed itself as contemporary art in Toronto for one day or one night. And I was like, well, what about the culture that's produced on the street all the rest of the time, especially like the culture of these buskers who are providing a cultural product illegally most of the time. So it's like I wanted to highlight those folks. So these people were all along Yonge Street. There was nothing to identify them as Nuit Blanche participants. So if you came along the street and were walking along the street, you would just think that they were there to capitalize on the crowds to earn money. But in fact, as you walk down the street, you'd start to hear them playing Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow by the Shirelles, or
like in different styles.
Yeah, they could all
So,
interpret
yeah.
the music in whatever way they wanted. So here's a flute player, a saxophone player, they'd be all playing these songs. As you walked along, you would start to hear the same song, and you would realize that that these people that you thought were just taking advantage of the crowd were actually an official event.
There was some kind of cohesive idea of bringing these disparate experiences together.
So we wanted to use that as a kind of template. We wanted to do things along the Rouge Valley Trail that as you're walking along the trail, there's these things happening, but you would not necessarily know that it was official public art. So one of the things, you want to talk about what we were...
Oh yeah, so what we decided to do is a similar thing where we would take like our kind of project budget to then distribute to various local musicians, some of whom are here today, and these posters here are basically like a graphic treatment of some calls for participation that we put out to local musicians and musical groups, as well as community groups, etc. So here you can say like musicians and composers, unique mobile instrument, participants will be paid $20 an hour. So what we wanted to do was, sorry, that one's kind of referring to these carts, but I think I'll just skip back to these individual musicians playing. Amateur musicians, to participate in a public art project, you will be paid, what, $17 an hour. Yeah. So this idea that like someone could kind of sign up, get paid $17 an hour, which was part of the project budget, to then practice their own instrument on the trail. So it's not like a performance where there's a kind of like, you know, promotion and advertising of like a finished kind of musical piece, but people were welcome to do things like practice their scales, learn how to play a new song, and be compensated for their time in order to do that. And we really liked the fact that someone could actually then, you know, it's just kind of like, you know, a bit of an incentive to like put some time aside to do something that you know, care about and enjoy. But I mean, the way my brain works anyways, it's like you give me a little reward for it and I'll be more likely to make time to do it. So all of these different musicians kind of signed up. They could choose what instrument they brought. They could choose what music they played. And the idea sort of around that was similar to Kevin's project, where it activated the trail in a way that was very open-ended, and we were really interested in this idea of maybe local folks who might be using the trail regularly would then start to encounter things multiple times and have kind of repeated or slightly differentiated experiences. And that could remain very open-ended without a kind of framework around it. So that took place over the summer and
In the
fall.
Yeah, and of course, each of the individual participants would then choose like how performative they want it to be. So some musicians would sort of find their own little corner where they were sort of tucked away. Other musicians really engaged with the public. These two, Kathy McWaters and Laurel Burnett, they had a repertoire that was printed out and sheet music, and they would, if anyone came by and said, hey, what are you doing? They'd say, well, we're playing these songs. You could pick one of these songs. Which one of these is your favorite? And they'd play for them. So they engaged with, they were a lot more performative.
Yeah, another thing, one of the ideas that we were sort of riffing on, and like that was part of a kind of longer conversation that we'd been having, like previous to this, was the ways that people sort of like walk around on the trail and in Unionville, and it's kind of like a place to see and be seen. But we had been thinking a lot about like, you know, people wear t-shirts with like slogans or text on them. And you're often kind of wondering, like, are you like, so you're making this statement, I'm reading this, do you want me to respond? Or is this just a kind of like personal expression that you're kind of like a billboard and you have this kind of personal expression on here? Like, what is the kind of like space of engagement you're creating through wearing a kind of message on your shirt as you kind of move through public space? And so we had been sort of like riffing off of like having these kind of long-standing conversations around different slogans that could be interesting to play with. Which is over here, you can see all of the different t-shirts that we designed with all these different slogans. And we made a kind of a lending library of all these t-shirts. So people could come into the gallery, borrow the t-shirts, wear them on the trail, and then give them back. We also put out a call to community groups to wear this accessory. And if there was a group, you know, if we had a group of, what was it, something like 10 or more people who would all wear a t-shirt together, we would make a $500 charitable donation to the charitable organization of their choice. So it could be a way to kind of like raise funds in the community and distribute. Yeah.
So the t-shirts, we were in working with this kind of idea, like, who is this t-shirt addressing? Am I actually saying this? Am I quoting this? Are you supposed to pay attention or not? We then designed 14 different t-shirts and played with the kind of the font choice and the color of the shirt that would counteract the content of what it's saying. And the content of the shirt, a lot of them were like affirmations or mental health slogans or reminders to be present in the space, because we were thinking about people wearing them outside in this trail system. So there was a lending library, and certain people came by and discovered it and wore the shirts. So I heard someone ask what it says. It says "good vibes only" in a very like harsh metal font. Good vibes only. So we had through this other call that Holly talked about, we had two groups that agreed to work with us. One was the Unionville Scout group. How many times did they? 5? 6 times. They wore their shirts. They decided to go color coordinated. So they wore the green shirts one day, and they would wear them on their walks along the nature trail. They went out 6 times. The other group that participated was the 105 Gibson Tai Chi group, who picked the shirts they wanted, and then we practiced their Tai Chi in the courtyard of the gallery and also out along the Rouge Valley Trail. I don't know, they look really beautiful, I think. They have all these props. So these were the groups that activated these shirts out along the trail. Then the other part of the project that we worked on is these 2 carts that you can see here. There's this one here, and then there's the other one in the corner. I had been working on kind of video project where it's hard to see in this still, but I'd made this kind of synthesizer, and this is out at the Dome. I was bringing the synthesizer along with me when I was doing my chores out on the landscape as this kind of soundtrack, and then I would sort of perform the chores as though I was doing a how-to video and would sing the instructions along with the synthesizer, but I needed something to bring the synthesizer with me, so I made a cart to carry the musical instrument around. And Holly and I had also been really interested in it, like, for a long time, in, like, the tinker's cart. So this is from 1936, this time, and even back into medieval times, like, you'd have a tinker who would go through the community with their metal stuff, and they would fix
Selling
things.
used things, fixing things, this kind of like mobile shop of like reused and repurposed, kind of like basic elements of life. Really interested in that as a kind of formal object. And also the one-man band. Yeah, just like this really kind of like eccentric object, musical instrument object to be played by an individual in public space. So that's sort of what we were thinking about also in terms of bringing music into public space. So
then we made these two carts. They're basically these sort of mobile sculptures that are, the basic platform is like a dog stroller.
dog strollers.
That we took all the fabric off and then added all of these weird instruments to. Some of them are like just ready-mades, like the bass drum and the xylophone and the cymbal. Some of them are like chimes and beer bottles with water in them, and then these two helium canisters that we cut out to make these kind of steel drum kind of thing. The thing about them, though, is like they're put together in a sort of familiar way, but they're not like a real instrument. So what we wanted to do with these is, like, the musicians practicing their own instruments, they're practicing something they already know that has a form that's already established. With these ones, there is no form that's already established. It's really hard to play
An actual song,
Yeah.
like something you might be familiar with. So they're more kind of like sound makers, and like some of the instruments that we built, like they don't even have like proper tuning or anything. So they're, and obviously they're like these very eccentric objects. So it's different than just having a kind of low key, like wearing a t-shirt. You like have this like really attention grabbing kind of object, right? And then people became curious about that. Like, what is this? Like, what are you doing? What is this? So different kind of engagements happened with that.
And basically the call is that you could earn more per hour playing these than you could playing your own instrument. Because, and we
It's
had
a bigger ask, right?
We had to keep upping it because nobody really wanted to use these. So in the end, I think we were at like 30 an hour or something. Something close to that to get people to do it. But people did, and we took them out, and like a lot of musicians would sort of find a little corner so that they weren't like attention magnets. But other people, like this father and son duo and this Joe trainer, you know, like people would interact. And the few times we took carts out, like the public would be like, what is this? Can I play? And they would want to play it. But these were also like you could earn a wage to go and take these things out and experiment with them. And essentially you would have to play with it because you couldn't just play a regular song. You'd have to make your own stuff up on it.
So yeah, kind of when this project ended, you know, due to like temperatures kind of dropping and it being kind of time to wrap up the outdoor engagements, and we had the opportunity to use this space to share the work further, what we were really thinking about was how these kind of like you know, unofficial activities, these kind of like formless things that were happening out in public space, how it changes when they come into a space like a gallery, right? So everything that's like presented in here is now like capital A art. And so we were really interested in not just kind of giving different kind of aesthetic language and different kind of designation of value to objects and props and ephemera, but also that like perhaps people who had, live in the local community or do kind of walk regularly on the trails, they could then come into here and then maybe have this moment where they then like, oh, it's like the reveal, right? Like, oh, that was an art project. I didn't realize that was an art project. Now I understand that, this was part of something like a cultural activity. So this riffing off of the kind of framing device of the gallery versus the kind of public trail space really allowed us to then play with kind of formal language. So this poster mural, like these calls had all gone out like over email as just like regular kind of text. But then we wanted to really kind of animate those and make those a kind of active part of an installation. So we had a lot of fun playing with kind of formal language of advertising, postering, etc. For example, looking at kind of graphic design of like public informational, and also, I'm just kind of talking quickly to move through, but like again, going back to our own individual practices, this poster mural was a project that I had done at ArtSpeak in 2011, where I had a bunch of slogans silk screened on posters that were outside on the street, and also in the gallery space. So we were kind of like, oh, hey, well, that worked really well for that. Let's do that this time as well. So we were kind of like, grab bagging from like previous projects that we've done individually to kind of bring them into this space.
We're good. We still have 15.
Are we good?
We have 15
Oh,
minutes.
okay,
still.
I'm rushing for no reason.
So, and part of what we were, the persistence of vision project that Holly had made, we were taking that poster idea and then we used this kind of public health poster from this era, like 1918, in which it's like the information is important and the graphic design is secondary. So the graphic design is like this font, and then it's this size, and then this size. And so we kind of took that for these as a kind of like, these didn't go out as posters like this. This is like what does this form do to it versus what happens with it when it's email. Again, it's this kind of commentary on what does the container of the gallery do to the project versus what does the project act like when you just encounter it out in the wild on the Rouge Valley Trail. This is the middle room, and in this space there's two works. One is this newspaper that we made. Toward the end of the summer or the fall when it was getting cold and we couldn't have the musicians practice outside anymore, we had an appreciation event where we got some food and we brought all the musicians together, and then we all talked about what the experience was like for them of playing out on the trail. We collected all those stories and then made them into this little newspaper. Again, it's like a nod to this is where kind of public information goes out. And to both of us, I think, this appreciation event was key to understanding the meaning, if you will, of the whole project. It's because in these stories in here tell you like what the participants, for them, what it was to do this stuff.
Yeah, and there's some really lovely stories as well. So grab a copy of the paper. You can take them with you. But really, that as again, a kind of like formal language, a container, the newspaper, to kind of bring aspects of the project to share, right? So some of these stories are really great. And then there's a set of headphones in there as well, where you can kind of hear, it was a recording that Kevin made as he was walking along the trail, and you can hear the musicians sort of playing on the trail. So you could come into the gallery space, put the headphones on, kind of hear the ambient sound of the music happening on the trails, kind of wander through the exhibition, read the stories, etc. And then, our last image is just of the t-shirts.
I'm just going to go back here. We also, these benches that are in here are the same benches that are out on the trail. So we got to borrow them from the city of Markham, so it's kind of like we're bringing the trail inside the space. And then the newspaper, you know, like they do, they end up on the park benches. And then this last image is the T-shirt display sculpture
we just
that's
made
over
a sculpture.
here. Yeah.
We made a big sculpture.
But the sculpture was interesting because we wanted to, again, like, I mean, this one's active, I'm wearing it, but now they're art, and so they're frozen in the gallery. They're removed from their context, they're aesthetic objects, and so we wanted to play with something that was kind of like store display, but not really. It's kind of like this aesthetic thing that's very still and in a way kind of dead. Like they're not active anymore. They're just to be contemplated.
And it's spatial, right?
Yeah.
They're you know, the ways that they're kind of oriented in space kind of fill up that whole gallery over there, but you don't get to kind of like touch them and play with them. So again, just kind of switching that, the designation of the object was something we were kind of playing with, and yeah.
And then Jan and Markham Public Art allowed us to continue to hire musicians to practice. So this is Victoria.
Hi, Victoria.
And she's here. So there's
Victoria has some really good stories in the newspaper as well. So,
there's still folks practicing in this space, and that there is a kind of designated time on the weekends, but you may or may not encounter musicians practicing when you come in during the week. And so, and the musicians that practice, again, like they have their own agency. So this is Calvin Chan, who records everything that he does, and I think probably posts it. So then this becomes his own platform for his own promotion of his practice. And that's the end of our show.
That's the end of our talk.
Does anyone have any questions for us? Yes. Oh.
Where are the Dawson City Nuggets now?
Oh gosh. Well, it was made so it could be flat packed. So they're all flat packed, and they're in storage up at the pavilion. Yeah, we have a lot of sculptures in storage up at that site. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so if anyone has anything else they want to kind of talk about, yeah, just Derek at the back, yeah.
I was going to ask, sorry, I left for half the talk, so I'm not sure if I got this, but I think in both your practices, but especially in Kevin's individual practices, sort of streamline of like romanticism, but maybe romanticism that sort of sees its own faults, if that makes sense. And I'm wondering if you kind of see that in your work, and if any of that is here, like kind of challenging a space, but in that maybe seeing the faults of the space, and then in the same respect, bringing something out of the site and seeing the faults of that, for instance, people playing a Lego and being there. So I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit to that idea of romanticism.
I think that's more a question for you.
It could be for you too.
My work's not so romantic.
No, it's not. I think there's a in this project, in this collaborative project, I think that there is a romanticism, but then a kind of there's a romanticism in opening things up to a community and having the community respond in whatever way. It's quite a utopian gesture, I think. But I think then the counter is as well. It's enabling a kind of democratic public. I think where the criticism comes in for our project is this is always framed, and the framing might be romantic. That might be how it's marketed. I feel myself a kind of cynicism for the gallery display, because it kind of, like the T-shirt sculpture, it's frozen. And there's a kind of deadness to that sculpture that I really like, because it points at the deadness of the museum. So I think in this kind of trying to talk about the slipperiness and then the inevitable framing of things is where I think that we have a criticism of any kind of romantic impulse. For me, I don't know if, like, this might not be Holly's take, but I think in my work and what I've been interested in this collaborative project is we're trying to talk about opening things up for people, and that's where you're both inviting the pitfalls of romanticism in, but also allowing for other readings that you might not have anticipated. And for me, that's why the newspaper is so important, because this offers multiple voices of what the meaning was. And there might be cold, cynical reasons in there might be romantic meanings, but it's opening it up, and I think that's what's really important. It kind of counters this thing that we talked about at the beginning, which was like, everything is always framed, and it's going to happen, but at least we're trying to open things up. So you might discover something, or this project might enable, like, oh, I could see something in a different way and enjoy it in a different way. I don't know if that answers the question, but that's kind of what I see happening. Yan.
Question, comments, feedback? It's funny, just hearing you guys talk about it, it reminds me of something that I almost forgot and almost originally what my thought was, and approaching you to work on this project. I think at the time I was thinking, I was really impressed by the Dome project, and I like this idea of life as art. So I think when I spoke to you guys, I'm not sure if you guys remember, it was like, it's not about inviting you guys to do a residency, take the Dome to do a residency on Rouge Valley Trail. It's can you guys take Rouge Valley Trail to the Dome for a residency? So I think it's interesting when you're looking at the trajectory project and how the previous project informed this one and provide a template and really get to this point. I really enjoyed it. And the other thing I just came to mind, I thought about it, is there's some resistance in the project. It's kind of this counterforce to the rigid administrative system and the procedures and how some of all these events take place on the trail, and resisting the idea of advertising. So it's become a pure encounter and chance encounter for the visitors. I was interested in when I look at the early project and before inviting Marcia and Nev, and we were walking on the trail, and we were first trying to figure out how we can work with the trail. What would be a proper process and to conceive a project for it. I think when we start working, and I'm still stuck on kind of a conventional approach, is to figure out a site. It's just looking for a potential site that can accommodate either an event or installation for something to happen on the trail. But now I'm looking back and what really happened and how the project really unfolds. And in the end, it was like, no, the site is actually picked by the musicians and the visitors. And so I really like that part, even though we didn't deliver it to dismantle this idea of model of a public art project making. But in the end, it unfold that way. That's only occurred to me now, and I'm quite excited about it. That's why I want to tell you. And I think the other thing was talking about this romanticism and utopia, and also I'm glad you pointed out the cynicism and in the t-shirts and sculpture there, because I think that's another beauty about this project. It's really there are three sites, and I think one site is all with Rouge River Trail, and that's a public art site. I think I personally, after years of working on public art, I do think when project unfolds in the unmediated environment, like those public spaces, it needs to require a certain level of generosity. So I think the cynicism doesn't really unfold well, but why? When the project being transported and translated into the gallery space, and I think then this type of cynicism and as a framing mechanism to address the site works, right? Yeah. It's being mediated in the environment. I think that's what I love about it, is like you guys really put thoughts into it. So we're not presenting a documentation of what happened. I keep repeating that. Like, it's not about the documentation of what happened on the site. It's really to think about gallery space and unmediated public spaces as two different sites, and how can we produce project frameworks and for those sites. And I just as an advertisement and for what's coming up, and I'm really excited. And so we're working on the publication for this project. Then we're going to launch it at the next event and of this project in the gallery space. So the musicians going to do a performance after all these practicings and then play with instruments. That will be an actual performance happen in the gallery space on April 6th, and we will launch the publication.
Sorry, it's a really long.
Thank you again. It's been really great to work with you. And yeah. Dan.
I enjoyed the talk very much. I'm not sure about the concept of utopianism. Not sure about that. That's really the best fit based on this. I think about optimism as opposed to utopianism, in that yes, I mean you're drawing obviously in the past you've all drawn on utopian imagery and languages and dome and things like this. That's very true. But just thinking about this as being neither utopian or optimistic, in that this has actually happened.
Yeah.
You've successfully engaged with the community. You have, on the level of engagement.
Mm-hmm.
This is evidence.
Yeah.
And then, for me, the optimism comes from using the show, using these materials as different kinds of promotional means.
Yeah.
I don't have an issue with taking this as promotion. To say,
Promotion of what?
you can do
Like
this.
what?
You can do this in your
Right.
community.
Yeah,
You can find
yeah.
out unconventional ways
Yeah.
to engage.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we were ever really framing this as a utopian project, but I do think like there might be a kind of hint of that kind of ethos in this kind of motivation to propose these activities that, yeah, anyone could like do or instigate, or even just this idea that like, well, life is interesting when you pay attention. Right? That like anything can really be a kind of like fruitful engagement. So like, for example, the blue helium canisters that are on this cart over here, these were like things that were like on the side of the road that in our neighborhood. So we go for walks regularly, just as like a thing that we do. And they were like thrown out in the trash after someone's party, and we walked by them like every day for like 3 months, and we were always kind of interested in them. And then we finally grabbed them and like turned them into an instrument, right? So this idea of like, you know, anything, there's a kind of latent potential in so many different things you might observe or experience or engage in. So yeah.
I mean, not everyone can build the dome, but this.
And I wouldn't recommend it either, by the way.
You know, there may be others, and that's maybe why this publication will be really important. There are others who may actually choose to activate in their, their context. You know.
I think that's what we would hope that the utopian impulse of this is like as a impetus or driver. But I it's not that framing is bad. We need framing. Language is a kind of framing of thought. Those things happen. I think it's just when it's at the expense of any other kind of experience.
But like, I loved putting the kind of like aesthetic frame on things like, you know, these email calls. Like, there's nothing, you know, beautiful or interesting about like, you know, sending out an email or receiving an email, or very rarely. But it was so much fun to then let's make these kind of like visually engaging. Like, what colors, like what's our color palette for this? Like, how many weird, like ugly fonts can we cram onto one page? Yeah, I mean, for me anyway, as like a sculptor, like one of the things I love doing the most is like giving a kind of formal language to something, right? So making assemblages or whatever, like taking things from the trash and then like giving them a kind of formal language, or a different way to kind of speak as an object or a form. So like I had so much fun working with Kevin and thinking about like, how can we make these sculpture out of these t-shirts? Like, what can we do? So that's just like pleasurable for us as well. So just really enjoying the opportunity actually to kind of use the space of a gallery to play with visual language and switch how content kind of lands and how it communicates to folks. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, Gwen.
More comment, just following on this. Yeah, I for me, it doesn't need to be like this binary of like cynicism or utopianism or romanticism. And for me, it's like this whole other language that's happening both in the gallery and outside, where it's about conversation and community.
Yeah.
And you're doing it through these different forms of through sound, you do, you know, walking in nature, like all these things. And for me, it's as kind of generative and in here, even with the gallery, I don't see it shutting it down at all. And I think the fact that it's inside and outside just makes it all kind of bigger and kind of, yeah, so.
Yeah.
That's
Thank
kind of
you.
where I go with it.
And one thing, we've been getting a lot of like photographs of people coming into the gallery and having fun playing with these, maybe like getting the chance to actually play with something in a gallery space too, which is like quite fun. Yeah, thanks. Anything else, or are we kind of ready to get on with other things? Okay, well, thank you so much,
Yeah.
everyone, for coming. We really appreciate your engagement, and thanks.
Thank you very much.